So I've had a few requests to talk about the original version of how you would do AJAX requests. So AJAX OG. XMLHttpRequest. This was the original object for making these requests. Well, I guess there was before that an ActiveX object in IE. IE version 5.5 added an ActiveX object that lets you do these XML HTTP objects, but this became the standard right here. So if you are looking to do backwards compatible content for IE version 7, 8, 9, 10, if you're in a situation where you have to support the older browsers that do not support fetch, then this is the object that you're going to have to use. So we're going to talk about this for a couple of minutes, and I'll explain how this one works as opposed to fetch. Okay, so we have a website here, JSON placeholder. Great website for doing fake requests. They've got a whole bunch of data here. You can make get, post, put, patch, delete requests to there, and they'll send you some data back. So we're going to use this as our source. We're going to be requesting users. So this is the URL that I've got in the code. We're going to be fetching these users, and there's going to be 10 users. We get the data for these 10 users so we can write something on the page. We'll get back to this. I just got a list of the HTTP status codes that we can get back. We'll reference that in a little bit. So let's jump into our code here. And here we have empty web page. It's got a header, main element with nothing inside of it, and then our script. The URL, this is the one that I just showed you that we're going to make the request to, the XML HTTP request. And I've got a copy of this code down in the description. The link to the code gist for this code is going to be there, so you can take that, follow along, and play with it. Here we are creating the object. This is the thing that's going to do the fetch requests, or the AJAX request. This is what we used before fetch. Now, on this object, there's a couple of event listeners that we're supposed to add: on ready state change and on error. Now, we can also do this as the XHR add event listener, and then ready state change is the event, or error is the event, and then you've got the function that runs. You can write it either way. We only do it this way just because this is the way that the code used to be written. Before add event listener was standardized, we did this. Now this is the only time it's going to be called. There's only ever going to be one on ready state change listener and one on error listener for the XML HTTP request object, so it's okay to do this approach. We don't need to add multiple listeners or provide the capability to add multiple listeners. It's only going to happen once. All right, so with the listeners in place, there's two methods that we have to call. One is where we define the request that we're going to make, and one is where we actually send the request. So for the first one, XHR open is the method, and then we specify if we want get, post, put, patch, and so on. Let's just start with get. That's the simplest one. And then the URL. And then there is also an optional third parameter, which is asynchronous. Now, by default, this is going to be true. Username and password, if they're required, you can add those as the fourth and fifth parameters. I'm just going to put true inside of here to say that, yes, we are doing this in an asynchronous way. Now, after you do the open, that's where you should put in your event listeners. And then after the event listeners, we want to call the method send. And the send method is the one that actually sends the request off to this URL. So we're making a call to this URL, and then this is what's going to listen for the response. The on error, this is going to be quite rare. This works, or this function rather, fires if there's really a problem, if something went wrong with the request, our network was down or something like that, that's when this is going to fire. If the request went to the server and something came back from a server to us, the on ready state change, this is the thing that's going to fire. And inside of here, we're going to have, oh, I guess we don't need that. There will be an event object, but we don't need to use that. The XHR object has a property called ready state. This goes through the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is the request hasn't been sent yet, so this function is never going to show the number 1. Number 2, the request has been sent, but we don't have anything back yet. Number 3, we've got some of the response back. Number 4, we've got the full response. So if I save this and run it now, we can see there's the 2, 3, and 4. So sent the request, got a bit back, got the whole thing back. Now, we really never care about number 2 and 3. It's really only number 4 that matters to us. So we're going to write an if statement here. Or, yeah, we'll do an if statement. So we can say if xhr.readyState is equal to 4, then we're good to go. We don't need to do anything if it's 1, 2, or 3. Number 4 is the only one we care about. I've got a response. Now I can actually work with it. Now I can look at the status object. And with the status object, I'm going to use a switch case statement. There we go. I'm just copying and pasting this in because too much to type while you're listening. So we're looking at a series of different HTTP status codes. Now, back in the browser, here we have the ranges. So if it's a 100, a 200, a 3, 4, 5, those numbers mean something. So something went wrong on the server, it's a 500. Something went wrong on the client, it's a 400. 300, it's cached, it's response. The server's doing something different, like there's a proxy involved, or some sort of redirect or caching mechanism in place. 200, those are all good. Those are very positive messages. And the 100, it's some information about something that's going on. You don't have your response yet, but you might have a little bit of information. So 200, that's the one that everybody's familiar with. That's everything's good. And then 404 down here, 404 not found. So file not found. That's 404 error. 403 forbidden. This is the one where you didn't have the rights to access certain content, which is similar to 401 unauthorized. This is you're missing the right authentication information. You don't have the right username and password or something like that. So very similar. But in any case, this is the list. I'll put the link to this down in the description. You can have a look at those. I suggest you become familiar with them. It's a good thing to know. All right, back to our switch case statement. So ready state was 4. We have the full response. Now I can look at the status to find out, was it good or not? Well, if it's a 200 or a 304, I'm good, or I've got cached content. So I'm going to write that out. This is where I would put my code to actually write something onto the page. 201. When you do a post, when you're creating something on the server, you might get a 201 response, which means, okay, thank you for the information. I have successfully created that record in the database or something like that. The response comes back, 201. We're good. Again, this can also have content coming back with it too, but it's a different situation, so we break them up into different sections. 403, that was our forbidden. We can do 403, 401. So not authorized or forbidden. We've got 404, not found, the file not found, 500, server-side error. There's other ones as well, but this gives you kind of a sample of what's going on. So I run this. Okay, I got a response back. If I look at the network tab, here we go, you can see all the requests that were made. And here's the request to the JSON placeholder. And sure enough, there's all the data. If I look at the headers, inside of here, there's the status code 200. I used get. I got back a 200 response. All the different response headers, the request headers, all that information about it. But this is the data that I got back. So we're good. We got everything that we were hoping for. If I wanted to then put it on the page, I could do that. Let's say we'll create a function here called output users, and we'll send the XHR. Now, I need to know what to send. There is an object called response that was added in the second version of XMLHttpRequest. It's not available in the old one, so if you really are looking at doing backwards compatibility, try and limit yourself to response text and response XML. So this would be for JSON. You've got a string that you want to convert from a string into a JSON object. And this one is if you were expecting HTML or XML content to come back. So those two, response text or response XML. Let's go with response text because I know that this is JSON. So output users, we'll create that function down here at the bottom. And this is our string content. So our data is going to be str converted with the JSON parse. There we go. Now we have an actual object that we could loop through. And if I come back here and take a look, you can see I have an array. So the data is going to be an array, and I loop through those. Each one of the objects is going to have an ID and a name. So we'll just write those two things out, ID and name. So data for each item. And inside of here, we're going to write the content out inside of main. We'll do each one as a paragraph, just to keep it simple. There we are, and I'm going to add this to the main element, but I'll just do it inside the loop. It's bad practice. Don't do this inside the loop. You should put it inside of a document fragment and then append it at the end, but just to save time, there's our main element, and then we can append child here. Append child, and there's our new paragraph being added. Okay. Come back in here, and there we go. There's our paragraphs added with the ID and the name. So we have got the content back. Now, one other thing that I want to show you, I mean, this is the majority of working with a GET request. You're just getting data and then displaying it on the page. That's most of what you need to know. The alternative here was the response XML. I'll leave that as a comment. If you are going to be working with posts, so you're sending data up to the server, that's the other thing. Down here, our last line was send, and I was sending up null. There was no data for me to send. But if I'm doing a post, I'm going to have some information that I need to send to the server. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to change this to a post, and we need to create the data that we're going to send. So let's say fd equals new form data. So I'm creating a form data object, and then I'm going to put the data that I want to send inside of here. We can say fd.append, and we're going to have first name, last name. There we go. I've created a form data object. I've added a couple of properties to that. And then this variable right here, the form data object, that's what we would send. Like that. So by sending this and by changing our get to a post, we've changed how we're making the request. And now here's our response. Created 201. We got a 201 response back from the server. We sent them some data. They sent us something. And let's come inside of here, and we'll take our response text, convert it to a string, and write it out. There's our main element, and we'll say main.text content is going to be equal to xhr.response_text, but we're going to convert that into, actually no, we'll just leave it as a string. Yes. That's all we need to do. So I'm just going to write out the object itself inside of here. And there we have it. So this is what we got back after creating that brand new ID. You remember inside of our user file, we had the IDs 1 through 10. So when we post a new one, we're getting back ID 11. So that's the one that we wanted to get back. Okay, and that's it. That is XMLHttpRequest object. That's how you can send requests. You can do post, you can do get, you can add data and send that to the server. You can listen for the ready state and then listen for the status and determine what you want to do with the response. All right, so I hope that helps you out. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments down below. And as always, thanks for watching.